This is a very special edition of Squawk Box. NBC News now officially projecting that Donald Trump has won the presidency. Joining us right now is pollster and political strategist Frank Luntz. We've been talking to Frank now for many a months in the days and weeks leading up to what's been an historic moment, Frank. And before we even just get into it, I wanted to get your biggest takeaway and maybe perhaps surprise, given I'm not sure that, as we've been talking, that this was not the outcome, I think, on the Electoral College map, but maybe even on the popular vote that you were expecting.
And when we'd know, which was not supposed to be till Saturday.
So how come you didn't compliment me 4 years ago when I did it?
Or
exactly
8 years ago when you said Hillary Clinton will be the next president? I don't know, Frank. I think a lot of what you've been saying the last couple of weeks I've disagreed with. I just have. And I disagree with you saying that if Kamala had changed a few things that she would have won. I disagree with that. The country was not ready. And I don't think she was ever in the lead. But Andrew, it's your interview. Go ahead.
Frank, well, just to the extent, I'm curious, on a morning like this, to the extent that anybody who is hopefully thinking about this is trying to be introspective about where they were right and where they were wrong, how do you think about it?
I think that the debate didn't matter. And that's the single thing that bothers me the most. And that's the one that I got wrong.
Not even the cat eating you're almost crying about, Frank?
No, it's a surprise to me that the public and Joe, you, that it didn't bother you. And it doesn't bother the public. But the public has spoken. And what's impressive about this is that Donald Trump is able to survive an onslaught of criticism through much of this campaign, and not only survive, but thrive. That he's going to win the popular vote, which I did not expect, that he's going to win all the swing states, which nobody knew, that in fact, not only is he winning, but he's bringing a Senate with him and likely a House with him. This is significant.
And so what does that say, Frank, so as somebody who's been in this business a long time, what does that say to you about either the strength of Trump as a candidate and as a communicator, the weakness, perhaps, of Vice President Harris as a candidate and communicator? Does it say something more broadly about the country and policy and the way they're thinking about this, the different parties? How do you break that down?
It's all three. Andrew, you're correct in all three cases that Donald Trump's support was so intense that it did not matter what people said about him. It did not matter what happened at his rallies. It did not matter his debate performance. They were going to stay with him because they believe in him and they're committed to him. And that is half the country. Harris's campaign, in their inability or unwillingness to define exactly what they would do in the first hours, the first days, weeks, and months, that her unwillingness to level with the American people and explain why some of her issues have changed, demonstrated what a weak candidate she was. And in the end, it would have had to have been someone else, not her, who could have beaten Trump. And as far as the country's concerned,
Frank, there's going to be a lot of recriminations in the Democratic Party, probably starting with Biden and Harris. But my question is, do you think that Biden, therefore, should have stuck in this? Would have that been a different outcome?
They should have had a vote. The public had a right to choose. This is the first vice president or the first candidate for president, other than when you have, God forbid, an assassination. She had never put herself to the test. She had failed in 2020. This is probably the most important thing for viewers. Her one chance to run for president, she had done such a horrible job, and that she didn't improve after 4 years. But in the end, it's also the public's disdain for high prices, their disdain for insecurity at the border and across the country, and their demand that the last 4 years that they did not succeed, that they failed on the inflation and affordability, and that the public did not want 4 more years of it. In the end, it was the public saying enough with an exclamation point and all caps.
When you think about what happens next in terms of the politics in Washington, it does look like we may be headed towards a sweep. What policies get enacted, what don't, what acts as a governor or not on that. I know we've talked a lot about the business community oftentimes saying they like divided government. I'm not sure that's necessarily the case, given that we actually have the Dow looking like it's going to open up 1,250 points higher right now.
Yeah, and the fact is that they look at Trump's policies. They were assuming that Harris had a good shot. It's one of the reasons why the stock market is doing so well right now, is that they know that tax policies are going to be different, that growth policies are going to be different. The question is, do they stand on tariffs? Because that's going to be a significant dispute in Washington, both in the White House and in Congress, and what happens with that.
So do you think all the economists, though, Frank, do you think all the economists, look, you heard Kamala Harris say it. By the way, I repeated it. The Nobel Prize-winning economists who all said that Trump's economy was going to become a problem. Even Elon Musk saying at certain points that he thought there would be temporary hardship. It'll be very interesting to see what happens over the next 4 years, of course. But clearly the American public did not look at that and say that either they thought that was accurate or that they cared, right?
And neither is the business community. They may have said one thing a week ago, but they're saying something completely different right now. And you can see that they vote by how they're investing, by how they're committing more dollars, and why the market's going to open up so much higher. That's their statement, that they agree with what happened. And my only warning is that we still are divided, that even with the Republicans gaining a clear control of the Senate and keeping control of the House with a couple, maybe 3, 4 additional seats, we're still an evenly divided country, maybe 51-49. And that I'm hoping that this ugliness and this gotcha politics can somehow subside, so that we can once again have these really strong emotional fights, but do so with respect, with civility, with decency, that we haven't seen in the last, frankly, in the last 8 years.
If you were, Frank, if you were running, we got to run, but if you were running the DNC right now and you were trying to be introspective to the degree you could be, what would you be telling them they need to rethink?
I'd be giving them 3 names: Cory Booker, Wes Moore, and Mitch Landrieu. All brilliant political people that have amazingly strong records and know how to communicate the values of the American people. Either of those 3 people could have beaten Donald Trump. Not saying they would have, but could have. And that's what the Democratic Party needs: people who understand and come from the community and know how to communicate.
I noticed one name's not on that list that I thought might be. Shapiro from Pennsylvania, no?
Okay, Shapiro and maybe Gretchen Whitmer. But I'll tell you one thing: the Democratic nominee for vice president, he's not on that list.